I just got back from holiday in America. I went to New York for 5 days and Boston for 3 days, and I accidentally spent a lot of money on yarn. Today in this video I'm going to talk through all the yarn stores I visited in New York and Boston and show you all the yarn that I bought back from my trip. I've never spent this much money on yarn before in one go, but since becoming a knitter, one of my all-time favourite things to do on holiday are check out the local yarn stores in the area that I'm staying. There's just something so special about going on holiday and buying yarn as a souvenir from that trip that you can then make into something that will then remind you of that holiday forever. I can't think of anything more special and sentimental, and that is one of the things that I love so much about knitting. You might remember last year I went on a holiday to Copenhagen. We went away for 3 days and I visited 10 yarn stores. That was a lot, that was very excessive. You can check out that video up here. I did not go that mental on this holiday, but I did buy more yarn somehow. So I went to 4 yarn stores in New York and just 1 in Boston, and today I'm going to chat you through them. If you two are planning a trip to New York or Boston, this might be good inspo as the yarn stores I recommend the most to visit. You can use this as a little guide as what to expect in each yarn store, and I'm just so excited to share all these purchases with you because I'm just so in love with everything I picked up. So we're going to start with New York, and we're going to start with the yarn stores that I went to in Brooklyn. There were 2 yarn stores on one road that I was very keen to go to, and the first was called Woolyn. So this was my first like New York yarn store experience, and I had a really good time in this store. Firstly, I found the owner here so lovely, kind of kept to herself but was also super talkative, complimented my hat when I walked in. She knew the exact pattern of my hat. I was wearing the rose knitwear Escher beanie, which she knew, which I just loved, and I really enjoyed this store. Firstly, this area of Brooklyn Heights is so beautiful. There's a really good coffee shop nearby called Nacco, so definitely be sure to check that out. There's also a really good bookshop kind of nearby called Books and Magic, check that out. But Woolyn itself, they had a really nice selection of yarn. I really appreciated that this yarn shop didn't feel too overwhelming or clustered. Everything was kind of nicely spaced out, felt like there was room to move around in. Might have also been because I was, I think, one of the only people in there at the time, but they had some really beautiful yarn in there. Everything from Barocco to Blue Sky Fibres. They had loads of brands that I've never even heard of before. And one thing I loved about this store was that they had these little like I Heart New York stickers next to specific yarn that was either made or hand dyed or from New York. So if you were looking for like a specific New York souvenir or memento from your trip, this store was perfect to go to because you could very clearly see what was kind of locally made, and also small business, which I really appreciate when I go into a yarn store. This store was just so satisfying to look at. Everything was like in little different cubby holes, had a really nice button selection. They also had like cones of yarns and yarn fibres if that's what you're into, and also their yarn was divided into kind of weights, so it's very easy to find your worsted weights, your fingering weights, etc. They had quite a lot of yarn from a brand called Murky Depths, which is hand dyed in New York. I made one purchase in this store, and it's purely because I can't get over how soft this yarn is. When I felt it, I just kept going back to it because it is so soft. So I picked up 2 hanks of the Blue Sky Fibres organic cotton worsted weight yarn in the shade Graphite. It's nothing really that special to look at, but oh my goodness, this yarn is so soft. It is one of the softest yarns I've ever felt. And I saw this and I felt this and I just couldn't imagine anything nicer on my head. So I decided kind of then and there that I would make kind of like a chunky worsted weight beanie, and I chose this colour. There were more exciting colours in store, but I was craving something just very neutral that would go with everything in my wardrobe. There wasn't a mirror in store and I was struggling to see what kind of colours would suit me. So I got my husband to help me film some clips with each colour against my face just to see what suited me. It was kind of between this and a nice cream. I do think both those colours together would have worked really nicely as like a striped beanie. But yeah, I cannot wait to knit this yarn up because it's so soft. This was $18.50 per hank, and it's 150 yards per 100 grams. So I've got definitely enough to make a beanie, and perhaps with a tiny bit left over. This is something that I want to cast on quite soon, just because it's a nice quick train project, and because I just think this winter is the perfect opportunity to knit this up. There were a couple more things that I was really keen to purchase in this store, but I was very aware that it was my first yarn store of the trip and I didn't want to go overboard too early, which is a good thing because fitting this lot into my suitcase on the way home was a struggle. From Woolyn, it is a 15-minute walk to your next yarn store, which is called the Brooklyn General Store. This, I've got to admit, is one of the yarn stores that I was the most excited about visiting on this trip, because I've heard brilliant things and because the layout looked great. So the Brooklyn General Store is kind of like an all-round crafty store. It's not just yarn and knitting, there's also fabric and sewing, loads of tools and notions. Inside this store it was very beautiful. It was kind of rustic, everything fit into these kind of wooden cubby holes. They had this beautiful wooden flooring, and they also had these like massive round metal kind of industrial like turny things with loads of yarn in the compartments, which was just very satisfying. Now, I had a little bit of a mare in this shop. I feel really bad this day for dragging G along to the yarn stores with me, because apparently we were in there for half an hour. It felt like we were in this shop for 5 minutes, but we were in there for half an hour, and he just said he watched me go back and forth for half an hour without actually like buying anything. So I didn't buy anything in this store because I was so overwhelmed. I feel like there was loads I could buy, but I really struggled in this store. I remember when we first went in, I found a yarn that I really wanted and like loved the look of and wanted to check out again, but I couldn't find it again. Like I remember like spending 10 minutes looking for that yarn again, and I just couldn't find it. Because everything is like laid flat in these cubby holes, I just found it really difficult to like find what I was looking for. Saying that, they did have an incredible yarn selection. They had loads of yarn from a brand called La Bien Aimée, which is a French yarn brand that I have never tried before but always loved the look of. They had this beautiful like tweedy confetti type yarn from that brand which I probably would have purchased had I had a little bit longer to look around. I say a little bit longer, I was in there for half an hour going in circles. They had a lot of Isia in this yarn store. They also had this brand called Lichen and Lace. These really beautiful hand-dyed yarns that I loved the look of. Again, loads of Blue Sky fibres, lots of Magpie fibres yarn, lots of brands that I've just never seen or never heard of before. So if you're looking for something a little bit more luxury, a little bit more hand-dyed and a little bit harder to find, maybe, I would definitely go to Brooklyn General Store. They also sell Knitting for Olive. I guess one of the other reasons I quite struggled in this yarn store was because I don't know if they were having a delivery that day or just sorting stuff out. There were these like massive metal things in front of a couple of the walls of yarn, so I couldn't actually get to half of the yarn in their store. I had a very overwhelming experience in that store, but also I kept being drawn back to this particular hank of yarn by brands called Bread and Butter, grown, dyed and spun in the US. So I probably should have picked up a hank of that because I don't remember seeing that in the store again. Really beautiful kind of soft worsted weight yarn, but because I had just purchased this Blue Sky Fibres one, it felt very similar, and it was also kind of a worsted chunky weight, so I didn't want to buy anything a bit too similar. Also, it was quite expensive in this store. The Bread and Butter worsted weight was $25 per hank for 200 yards, so slightly more than this one. I wish I could have had like an hour in this store. I definitely would have left with something. Lichen and Lace yarn really stood out to me. I kept going back to that as well. But yeah, I left empty-handed. So the next store that we went into was called Downtown Yarns. This store is in the East Village, which is an area of Manhattan that we spent a lot of time in and that we really adored. A very foodie area, loads of independent kind of restaurants and coffee stores. Really recommend the East Village. We'd probably stay in that area again if we were to go back to New York. And Downtown Yarns was just a pleasure to shop in. Probably the smallest yarn store of the trip, but one that I really enjoyed and would recommend. They had a lot of Jamieson's Shetland yarn, which was really nice but a little bit too rustic for me. They had this really beautiful kind of silky yarn selection. I really was drawn to this yarn from Cascade Yarns. It's called Ultra Prima. I feel like this store as well was a little bit more affordable than Brooklyn General Store. They had a kind of bigger range to choose from. It wasn't all hand-dyed and all luxury. It was kind of a nice variation of prices. They had a lot of Noro in this store, and also something about this store which I found very interesting was their shelves of yarn went right up to the ceiling, and they had this ladder that you can like drag across to reach up to the highest yarns, but I don't think customers are allowed to climb the ladder. And so for that reason it's kind of hard, and it felt like a bit of a wasted opportunity to like properly yarn shop and browse, because I couldn't tell what the yarns at the top were. There weren't labels or anything. Just feel like it was a bit of a shame that they had so much beautiful yarn that you couldn't necessarily reach or see or touch or feel. I think they would really benefit from having some little signs up of each yarn so you can easily kind of spot the brands and what you're after. But saying that, I did make a purchase in this yarn store of some yarns that I'm so excited about. So I made a really great purchase in this yarn store for a couple of projects that I'm so excited about. So first up, I treated myself to some Noro. So I got 3 balls of the Noro Silk Garden Sock Solo in the shade TW01. This is 300 meters per 100 grams, which I think is great value. This cost me $22 for 1 ball. So like, I think with one of these you could make a small ranunculus just with 1 ball of this. I was just so drawn to the colour of this. It is so beautiful. It is the perfect like iridescent grey blend of shades, which kind of far away doesn't look that interesting, just looks like maybe a muted grey green, but when you look up close you can see all the beautiful colours and textures running through this. I'm so excited to cast on something in this so I can see how all of these lovely colours work up. So pretty. There's a real mix of everything in this ball of yarn. So I got 3 balls of this. This is quite an expensive purchase, but that gives me enough to make a jumper of some sort or a cardigan. I'm thinking that I would want to hold this with a mohair just to soften and blend all of those colours out a little bit more, and to bring the gauge up, because this says it's a 3.5 to 4mm needle project. Technically it's a sport weight. On Ravelry it says that I have enough here to make the Cloud Sweater by Petite Knit, Sweater number 14 V-neck by My Favourite Things Knitwear, which has been on my list for so long, the Ranunculus, the Lento Sweater by Joanna Helen. There's loads of options for what I can do with this, but I'm glad I got 3 because that gives me the flexibility to be able to do what I want with it. There was another yarn in this store that I fell in love with purely because it was so soft. It's a brand that I've never heard of before, and I'm not sure you can get in the UK, but I really hope you can because it is the softest thing I think I've ever felt. So this is the Illimani Royal One. It is 100% royal alpaca, and I went for the most beautiful kind of bright orange red shade. This to me is like my dream red. I definitely lean more towards orange toned reds rather than blue toned reds in terms of lipstick, so I thought having a jumper in this colour would just be so beautiful. In 100 grams of this you get 200 meters, and apparently this is a worsted weight gauge. I'm not too sure about that. I'd say it's maybe more of a DK, but I haven't tried knitting with it yet, so I'm unsure. But just look at the colour and I can't express how soft this is. So this was $21 per hank, and I got 3 in total, so I have about 600 meters. I'm thinking with this I'm going to make either another cognac sweater, because you need very minimal amount of yarn for that. I could turn it into a t-shirt or make it quite cropped if I find myself running out of yarn. Also I'm thinking, and you have to let me know if this is a good idea or not, I'm thinking of making the Light Loop sweater by Other Loop. The Light Loop sweater is a fingering weight project that uses 7mm needles for a really nice kind of open gappy gauge kind of look. I saw someone on Ravelry who had knit this up using DK and a Suri lace weight yarn held together, and I really love the outcome. But what a fantastic, beautiful project. Love the idea of choosing like a gappy open weight project and using a slightly thicker yarn for it, and I can't imagine anything better for this yarn than that kind of really beautiful soft kind of easy to wear jumper that you could throw on every day. I'll leave a link to the pattern that I've fallen in love with below that uses that different yarn combination. But in her project she says she used 526 meters of DK weight yarn, so I have more than enough to make that jumper but in this bright red. I think I probably will try and find a mohair to match or a suri to match with it, purely because the reviews of this yarn say it pills a lot. I can kind of understand that. It's so soft, I imagine any kind of friction would give it some pilling, so if I held a mohair or something else with it, maybe that would kind of soften that effect up. We shall see. So excited with both of my purchases in that store, and I can't wait to knit up a bright red jumper for my wardrobe. Also quite festive. Maybe I'll cast that on soon to wear as kind of like a Christmas jumper. And then we went to Knitty City. Knitty City is a yarn store that I was so excited to check out. I've heard loads of good stuff about it. It is in the West Village. Again, could have spent hours in this store. I think in the end I spent about 45 minutes, maybe an hour in there. It's a small store, but it is crammed full of yarn. It's busy, but really well organized, so you can find everything you're looking for super easy. So that one of the things I loved most about Knitty City, and the reason it might be my favorite yarn store in New York, is because of the layout. So they all have a fingering weight section, a lace weight section, a DK weight section, a chunky section. They've also got a hand dyed section and a cotton section, so it's so easy to find what you're looking for in there, despite the store being kind of small and cluttered. I just loved the layout in that store. They had some beautiful yarn in there, and I did a little bit of research before I went in to see what brands I wanted to check out, what brands I find really hard to get in the UK and that I haven't seen in real life and that I'd really like to kind of touch and feel. And I hit the jackpot in this store, guys. So brand wise, they had some brands that I've never seen in real life before. They had loads from a New York brand called Hue Made, really pretty hand dyed yarns. They had loads from a brand called Plucky Knitter, loads of Malabrigo, which I wasn't too bothered at looking at because I know I can get that quite easily in the McCulloch and Wallace store in Soho. They had a lot of Barocco vintage, which I was looking at because it's a very affordable yarn, good for kind of hats and accessories. They again had the Blue Sky Fibres yarns in there, which I was very tempted to pick up again. They had loads of Cascade, and Cascade was the brand that I was most excited to go into this store for. They also had Lang Cloud, Rowan in there, Rowan Kid Silk. They have a lot of yarn in this store. I also met a follower, watcher of my vlogs in Knitty City, which was so nice, something I really wasn't expecting. I was literally there with my basket looking at all the yarn, and a girl asked to squeeze through with a buggy. Then she like did a double take and was like, oh my god, I watch your videos. It was so lovely to meet a fellow American knitter in a yarn store. I didn't see what she managed to purchase, but we had a nice little chat about what she was working on at the moment, and that was just such a lovely experience. And I bought so much yarn in this store for quite a few different projects. So I knew when I went into that store that I wanted to pick up some Cascade 220 because it's more affordable in America than it is in the UK. I've never seen Cascade 220 in a yarn store in London or the UK. I know you can get it from Wool Warehouse, but it's slightly more expensive and it's really hard to tell the colours in real life, like what they're going to look like. So I was super excited to go into Knitty City and check that out, and I ended up getting 2 sweater quantities of Cascade 220 purely because I couldn't choose what shade I wanted. So first up, I picked up 5 balls of the Cascade 220 in the shade Greystone Heather, which is a really pretty kind of heathered mild grey. Very classic, very basic, but I've never knit with this colour before, and it's a colour that I wear a lot in my wardrobe, so I would love a jumper or a cardigan in this dark grey. I am thinking of making the Hanny cardigan by Knitters and Friends with this. The Hanny cardigan is like, the perfect oversized boxy fit, button-up cardigan that has been on my list since I first saw it. It's in my autumn winter knitting plans video this year, so it's something that I really want to cast on, and I just think in this dark kind of charcoal would look so cool in my wardrobe. So I have enough of this now to cast that on. Was $11.50 and the conversion worked out to be around £8 a ball. My battery just died, but we are back. I also picked up a sweater's quantity in this colour, which I just fell in love with. This is the colour Aspen Heather. It's more of like a neutral creamy grey. I can't quite put my finger on what kind of colour this is. It looks like a cream base but with grey specks running through it. I also bought 5 balls of this, either for the honey cardigan or the baguette jacket, which is a pattern that again has been on my list for so long. I actually think this would make a really nice baguette jacket because it's a nice light colour. You'd be able to see the textures and the cables really well. Or I could make the Dagmar jacket with this. I think I might need one more ball to make the Dagmar, but you can, as I said, buy this from Wool Warehouse. The dye lot will be different, but I could always use the dye lot for either the cuffs and the button band, so it wouldn't be that wildly noticeable. 5 balls of each, that was like a lot of money in itself. But then I found the holy grail of yarns in this yarn store. I found this. You guys, they had the Noro Madara in the shade Saki in this store. If you are a knitter or if you watch knitting YouTube, you will know how rare and how hard to get this yarn is. For some reason, this yarn is just out of stock everywhere in this particular colorway, and I can see why, because it is so beautiful. The camera isn't even really picking up how beautiful this yarn is. So it's like a white, grey, beige base, but with all these little tweedy specks of colour running through it. And I have wanted this yarn for so long, and I can't believe I found a sweater's quantity in Knitty City. So I have got 5 hanks of Noro's Madara in the shade Saki, and I honestly felt like I hit the jackpot. So this was like in a basket on the floor, kind of not as noticeable as on the shelves, and I feel like for that reason maybe people just weren't looking down below and like weren't spotting it. But I should also say I was the first one in that yarn store that day. Like as soon as it opened, I was hanging around outside, I went in. And it's so funny as well because I went up to the till with this in my basket and I heard everyone whispering about me. The staff were like, oh my god, look at, she's buying that yarn. And I was like, oh no, have I done something wrong? Like I felt like I was in trouble. But it turns out the staff in that store wanted to purchase this yarn, but I'd sadly got there instead. She said that this yarn came in at 5 PM the day before, like just before they closed, and I was the first one in and I saw it and I bought it. They did bring out another 5 balls of this yarn after I'd purchased this, so I don't know how many sweaters quantity they had got in their store in that delivery, but I just feel like it was serendipity that I went in at that particular time. On that day that they had that delivery, it was meant to be, so I couldn't not pick this up. This was very like a luxury purchase. 1 hank of this was $27, so that's a lot of money I spent, but it will just make a project that I know will be like a lifetime staple in my wardrobe, like an heirloom. And now I just need to find the perfect project for this. Just for details, this is 60% wool, 30% silk and 10% alpaca, so it does feel quite rustic, but I think with blocking it will really soften up. Again, I think I might maybe hold some sort of lace weight with this. I'm not entirely sure yet. I think with like a white mohair might just again help soften those colours out a bit. But pattern options for this idea, I could make again a cloud sweater. I can make cardigan number 8 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. I have enough to make a cardigan. There's a chance I might need to make it a tiny bit more cropped depending on how I go. I could make the Lakes cardigan by Ozetta. I have wanted to try an Ozetta pattern for a while, so this might be the perfect occasion. Or the Lakes pullover by Ozetta. There's so many different options I could make with this beautiful Aran weight yarn. If you have any suggestions, do let me know what you would knit if you had this yarn. I don't want to rush into it. I want to find a project that I'm just super excited about. But I imagine a cardigan is the way to go with this. It's true love. 2 more purchases from Knitty City. I did tell you I made a lot. I've been looking everywhere for a yarn to use for my Miu top by Una Gill. This is a really beautiful off-shoulder with ribbing until the bust. I really love off-the-shoulder tops, and I've been looking everywhere for the perfect yarn for this. The pattern calls for a fingering weight and a mohair. I didn't want to use a mohair for this because I do have a bit of a mohair sensitivity, so I have instead chosen to use a DK weight by itself, and I just couldn't find the right yarn for this project. I have been looking everywhere, and I finally found the perfect yarn in Knitty City. So it's a brand I've never heard of. This is Sonnet by Plymouth Yarn. The main reason I went for this is because of, again, how incredibly soft and silky it feels. This is 60% merino wool, 20% mulberry silk and 20% bamboo viscose, and I cannot express how soft this is. I feel like wearing this top is just going to be an absolute dream. So in 100 grams you get 328 yards, and I got 2 of these, so I definitely have enough now to make the Miu top. I'm so excited to cast this on. Also really happy with this colour choice. I got the colour Cork. I really wanted something that would match the project photos, like a nice taupey brown grey, and I think this is exactly what I was after. Cannot wait to cast this on. I'm hoping I don't need to hold a mohair with this. I haven't swatched yet. So technically this is a sport weight yarn. I'm really hoping I get gauge with this. If not, I will have to find a mohair to hold with it, or a suri maybe, just to keep that softness. But have you ever used this yarn? I'd love to know. My final purchase from Knitty City was kind of a souvenir yarn. This isn't for me. I'm taking part in like a knitter Christmas swap, like a mystery Knitty Secret Santa this year, which is run by the My Favourite Murder Knitterinos fan group on Facebook. The deadline's closed now to be like considered, so if you are a fan of the My Favourite Murder podcast and if you are also a knitter, be sure to check out that group for next year's kind of Secret Santa mystery swap. But I've got a person who I'm buying yarn for as part of this swap, and this, I saw this and I had to get it for her because I know that these are her colours, and it's a New York yarn, so I was very excited to get this. This is from a brand called Yarn Over New York, so it's like a New York yarn brand, and I got the shade Greenwich Village, and it is full of these very beautiful pinks, purples, whites, blues, and then greens, yellows, oranges. And my yarn swap person said that purples, pinks, blues and greens are her favourite colours for yarn, so I was just so happy to find this. It's exactly what I wanted. This hank was $29, so quite expensive, but hand-dyed, a lovely souvenir. DK weight, which is the preferred weight of my Secret Santa. So yeah, very, very happy to have bought that back for her. And that was everything I purchased in New York. But we're not finished yet because we also went to Boston. So when I was doing my research for yarn stores in Boston, I could only find really 3, and I only made it to one of them purely because we were only there for 3 days, and they were all kind of outside of the main kind of city centre. I actually ended up getting a taxi to this yarn store because it was really out of the way of where we were hanging out on our Boston trip. I definitely wanted to go to a yarn store, and so we made it to the Boston Fibre company, which I wish we had a store like this in London in terms of having like a social knitty hub. This store was so like geared towards community and the social aspect of knitting, which is really missing in London. I know that they also have that in Iceland. There's like a knitting cafe. In Copenhagen, they were like knitting cafes, but there really isn't anything like that in London, and it's such a shame. I think it'd be so nice if there was. So at the back of this yarn shop were 2 massive sofas and a huge whiteboard which was mapped out like a calendar with all of their knitting events on it, and they had like book clubs and like chat and knits and like Halloween knitting, and oh, it just looked so fun. There were two people that didn't know each other sat on the sofas knitting, who were just having a conversation about knitting. And if you had like a spare couple of hours to go and like sit and knit somewhere that isn't your home, surrounded by beautiful yarn in a really safe, inclusive space, it was just like my dream. I had a really nice time looking around this yarn store. My only criticism is that I found the lighting really difficult. Like, I ended up getting my phone torch out so I could properly visualize the colors, because my eyes are good, but I was really struggling to see the colors in this store. I think the lighting was quite orange, and it's kind of like a basement store with not much natural light at the back, which I found quite a struggle. But apart from that, I really enjoyed my shopping experience in here. Again, they had a lot of cascade yarns. They had a lot of kind of indie small business hand dyers, which were really lovely but very expensive. They had their own yarn brand as well, Boston Fibre Company yarn. I loved this kind of pastel shade yarn here. I didn't get it because I just don't wear colours like that, sadly. Like, I'm always drawn to these colours, but I know that I will never wear it, so I need to stop looking at those kind of shades. I found the store, again, really easy to browse in because it was divided up into sections. So there was a massive wall of fingering weight, there was a massive wall of DK, and a massive wall of worsted kind of Aran weight yarns. So again, very easy to shop in and find what you were looking for. And they had this really cool brand that I meant to look into. It's called Circus Tonic Handmade. I am a trapeze, I do trapeze, like aerial arts, and so I was really drawn to this brand, but again, they didn't really have colours that I would personally wear. Circus Tonic Handmade is actually an Aussie yarn brand made with Australian wool, so if I ever go on holiday to Australia again, I'm going to need to definitely check those out. They also had some really beautiful notions in this store. I didn't end up buying any, but I was really drawn to these kind of sardine tin fish stitch markers, which were so up my street. So I did make a purchase in this store, and I was given a little free tote bag. I was also given this free tote bag by Knitty City, which was really nice. I don't know if that's the done thing in America, I'm not really sure, but very kind. Firstly, a little souvenir from this trip. I really wanted to get something from their brand, so I got one of their very own yarns. This is the Boston Fibre Company mohair. This is in the shade Hot Cocoa. It is hand dyed in Boston. It's 70% super kid mohair and 30% silk, and in 50 grams you get 400 meters, and I really loved this colour. Kind of like taupey beigey browns, which I really enjoy. So I don't have a project in mind for this yet, but I can't wait to work it up. It feels very, very soft, and it's just nice to have something from the actual yarn store in my hands too. I picked up one hank of the Cascade Yarns Wool Packer Light. I had a specific project in mind for this, but I can't remember what it was. It might have been the Isabel gloves, which I need a DK weight for. But again, I've never seen this wool before, and it's 60% Peruvian Highland wool and 40% superfine alpaca. Can you just tell I'm really drawn to alpaca at the moment? I think because it's so soft. This hank was $15, and for 100 grams you get almost 300 yards. So I'll definitely be able to make some sort of hat out of this. I think I actually bought these to hold together to make a hat, which would be a really, yeah, that is what I did. That is what I did. I bought these to hold together, but I haven't done a swatch yet, so we'll see what that looks like. I also fell in love with this yarn from Cascade, so much that I got it in 2 shades. This is the Cascade Yarns Heritage 6. This is 65% superwash merino and 25% nylon. It is so soft, like so soft. I got it in 2 shades because I couldn't choose which one I wanted. But it's apparently a fine yarn. 100 grams, you get almost 300 meters again, and this was $12. I'm thinking some sort of like stripy hat or stripy something, but similarly I love the colors individually too. It doesn't say a shade on it, but I'm pretty sure this shade is called Limestone. It's a really pretty pearly cream white, and again, I'm not too sure on the shade of this. It's colour 5631, and it's a nice like dark charcoal heathered grey again. 2 more yarns. I got one of my friends, Hank, so she was house and cat sitting whilst we were in New York, and I wanted to get her something little, so I bought her also a Cascade Yarns Woolpacker Light in this really beautiful kind of dark green shade. It's kind of like two-toned. It's like green with some hints of yellow in there, and I feel like this is really her colour palette. So I thought she could make a really nice hat with this. I don't think she's ever made a hat before. And also something I really enjoyed from the Boston Fibre company is they had like a basket, like a tiered basket full of like stash busting yarn that I guess you could either donate to the store or is just left over from their craft nights. But all of the yarns, it was a real mix of yarns, weights, colours, and it was all $3 each. And I found quite a big ball of a really beautiful kind of hand-dyed fingering weight yarn that I just couldn't resist picking up. Part of me actually thinks it is the like fingering weight version of this because the colours are super similar. This to me looks like half 100-gram ball, so I think I might have like 50 grams of yarn here, so I couldn't resist not getting this. I said I don't know what it is, but it's really pretty and very soft. Oh my goodness guys, what a huge video. That is so much yarn for one person to buy, but safe to say I'm now on a yarn ban unless it's to buy like a mohair to go with any of these particular projects. I'm so excited to knit all of my projects up. I've got about honey cardigan, baguette jacket, tweedy Noro project, I've got my Miu top, I've got my light loop sweater, potential cloud sweater out of this, that's 6. I've got at least 6 jumper projects here to knit up, so I'm going to be very busy this autumn winter. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Sorry it's been such a long one, but I hope you've enjoyed seeing all my yarn that I've purchased. I'd love to know if you've used any of these yarns before and what you thought of them. If you have any projects you think would work really well with any of these particular yarns. I'd really love to know if anyone has used Cascade 220 before, the non-superwash version, and how it wears up. Whoa, the sun has come out just as I finished. Yeah, it's a yarn that I'm just very interested in, and I hope I enjoy working with it. I think I will because it feels very soft. Lots of love guys. Mwah.